introductory stuff and then kind of go from there. If there's any questions, I'll just pause sort of at certain points. I've structured the presentation in about 3 sort of sections, so I don't want everyone to sort of have a question and then by the end of the presentation you've forgotten it. So I'll just pause, I'll ask for any questions, and please ask, because yeah, I would, and there's no silly answers either. Questions rather. That was a silly answer. So building better agents. Okay, so agents is a bit of a nebulous term. It's a new term, right? We know what GPTs are. GPTs are the things we talk about in ChatGPT. Talk to ChatGPT, right? So we ask a question, we get a text response. Now, agents, what we're aiming to do here is extend the functionality of GPTs. And part of the reason it's a little bit nebulous is because there's a bit of blending here, and I'll go over that, so we don't need to sort of get into that immediately. So before we go into all of our slides, I'd like to thank our sponsors. All right? So thanks, David, if he was here. Let's pretend he was here. I know we do have a David here, just not the right one. But yeah, thanks to our sponsors here for making this day happen, and then also David, who's been organising this for a number of years now. And in fact, I'll go over a bit about myself. I was never really in sort of development, that sort of deep into tech. I was an operations person, okay? So until about three years ago, and I came into one of this exact conference 3 years ago, and I thought, man, these are the smart people. This is where the big brain people are at, and I was really interested. So that's kind of where I started my journey, and I've basically spent the last 3 years really investing in this space, particularly in AI and what we can do in the future with AI. So this is David's next conference, so keep that in mind if you want to get in on that and enjoy that conference. There's a bit of a discount for you as well. Okay, so we'll go a bit of a presentation overview. So conceptual overview of GPTs and agents, the evolution of GPTs, right? So that touches a little bit on what I said with a bit of blending. They've evolved, they're doing different things now, and they will continue to evolve, okay? And we're gonna discuss agents. What are they? How do they differ from just your general ChatGPT sort of interface, or just your OpenAI API without tools, right? Some of you may not know what that is, that's fine. It's not necessary. Okay, so benefits, agents, use cases, and then some frameworks, popular frameworks. So we'll go over some features, and then we're going to go to some AutoGen examples. And also, in addition to that, I should have AutoGen Studio UI, which is a user interface which is fairly recent, which we'll go over as well. So, okay, GPT evolution, right? Now, we can see that it's a bit of a short timeline, right? So March 2022, we had GPT 3.5. Now that's not a long time ago. Obviously AI has been around a lot longer than that. But just seeing that this is I don't know what that is, but I'll explain what the content is on that if we need to. But yeah, so we started with GPT 3.0. Well, that actually is 3.0. 3.5, ChatGPT, GPT-4, and now, as of this week, we have GPT 4.0, right, which is very exciting. And we'll actually be using that in our examples today. Okay, so as a very simplistic example of GPT limitations, right? And I also want to caveat this by saying I understand that functionality within ChatGPT, for instance, people are making their own custom GPTs and we're extending functionality here. Really what I would be this context, a GPT is just a GPT like 3.5 turbo without function calling or tools, okay? So, imagine we have a building manager, we have a construction worker, right? A building manager is our user, that's us, right? A construction worker is a GPT. I know it's a weird example, but it'll make sense, okay? She asks our construction worker, I want you to install a new water heater. I can't do that, I have no tools. See, we just have the construction worker, he doesn't have any means to be able to achieve that task, okay? So, this is like a computer says no, right? So we see that, we've seen that quite a bit with our interactions with AIs, where I'm an AI, I can't do that. It's becoming less and less the case as these GPTs have improved. A good example would be, I don't have access to recent information. OpenAI is working to continually update that now. But there was a period of time there where it was quite annoying. You know, you'd ask what you would think would be reasonable questions about not even so recent past, but as long as it's beyond that cutoff point, we don't have the answer, right? And it's just, we don't, yeah. So, another example is, can you please send an email to aisteve@gmail.com telling that everything's good is for tomorrow's meeting. Probably this is the little custom instructions that I thought was funny. My sister uses my ChatGPT account, so I thought I'd add little custom instructions there. Sure thing, here's a draft for the email, right? So immediately it hasn't sent the email, it's reverted to the next most logical sort of idea, which is to just give you a draft. Okay, that's fine. Actually, can you send it on my behalf so I don't have to copy and paste it? I'm afraid I can't send emails directly, right? And obviously, when I'm writing that, I know that I can't do it, just an example. So, but that's something we can address. So we go back to our construction worker, right? Now we've actually equipped our construction worker with some tools, right? And this will become important when we go into our AutoGen functionality. So we've equipped our construction worker with some tools. So it has the tools to be able to do the job, but maybe it doesn't have the specific information, right? So relating this to ChatGPT, you could have, you could ask a question that's quite, I was actually speaking to a client yesterday, and he's in a very specific niche area in something to do with horses. It was so niche, I don't even know what it was, but he was saying, look, I asked ChatGPT about information on this specific thing, and it doesn't really give me good responses, okay? And I would expect that, because they have a certain amount of training data that these are trained on, and it's not guaranteed that absolutely everything, every bit of knowledge in the universe is going to be included. So a solution, so here's the manual, right? So here's the manual for the water heater, if you develop and install it, right? So what we call this is RAG, so that's retrieval or augmented generation, right? So essentially what we're doing is we're augmenting the response by inserting specific data, right? So in this instance, the building manager said, I'll give you the manual, right, for the water heater, and so that you have the specific knowledge to be able to achieve that task, okay? So our construction workers got our tools now, he's got our manual, so retrieval augmented generation component, right? And there is a bit of a crossover with manual and RAG and functions here, because our RAG is often achieved through a function, right? So it's a function that retrieves the information and puts it into the GPT. Does anyone have any questions so far? That's all good? Okay. Now, I thought I would extend this a little bit further, and this is the last slide of this. I know it's just a simple example, but okay, maybe I don't. Well, the previous slide, it says, is this manual the most up-to-date information, right? So it's got the manual. This is actually the most recent information. Maybe there's been recent innovation in water heater technology that he doesn't know about, and and you might need to know, right? So we plug in a up-to-date information via web search, and that is also a retrieval augmented generation feature, right? So these two are sort of the same kind of thing, but different. This is specific documents that are existing, say, on a local disk or on the internet. That's static, they don't change, and this is information that is up to date, it can be changed in real time, okay? So, now that he's got all of the tools to do the job, I take action, right? Now, for some reason he's going to install a water heater with a wood saw, but that's and a bunch of I don't know what that I want to see how that water heater turns out. But the point here is action oriented.
He's going to build a fire.
Sorry?
He's going to build a fire.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there might be some workplace health and safety concerns there. Anyway, but it is action oriented, so it's taking action, right? And if there's anything that I want you to sort of get out of this in terms of thinking about GPTs or AI and its use cases in the past, now, and in the future, it is transitioning from a conversational dialogue where it's providing information to taking action, right? So doing the things. I'll go into that a little bit further, right? Why agents? So agents, specifically fine-tuning specific tasks, can be given tools to achieve specific tasks. Can be integrated with various systems, platforms, automating workflows and enhancing productivity. Can learn and improve based on user interactions, okay? So all of those are very easy to achieve. What's in it for me, right? So whenever we look at something, particularly a bit of a nebulous technology like AI, right? Everyone says AI. We've got to think, what does this mean for me, right? I work 40 hours a week, whatever, 50 hours a week. How can this help me? The answer is automate routine tasks, allowing you to focus on strategic and creative tasks, right? So I believe the future of AI is releasing humans from the constraints of this monotonous routine tasks that they probably don't need to be doing or that can be outsourced, allowing us to focus on more creative tasks, things that I would say are more, I wouldn't say higher IQ because that's a nebulous term in terms of, maybe AI could be considered higher IQ, but logic is not really the best strong suit right now for AI. So logical, strategic, creative tasks, we can kind of focus on those. You can reduce errors in data processing, analysis, and reporting. Now this often happens when we're going through a big data set or doing a lot of data analysis, and when we do repetitive tasks, we have cognitive strain and we become tired, right? And that's where errors occur, right? So we don't want to compromise our analysis by the fact that we're doing this on a repetitive basis, right? So AI agents can handle this without compromising quality, right? And they also can operate continuously. So 24 hours a day, they'll always be operating. Another thing to think about is if you give me a lever long enough, depending on, some people say long enough or lever, give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, I can move the world, Archimedes. Basically what Archimedes is saying there is he's commenting on the idea of leverage, right? So one of the reasons why tech companies are often valued a lot, can increase in value significantly over a shorter period of time relative to, let's say, more traditional organizations, is because they're highly levered, right? The technology gives them a leverage that other companies don't enjoy, right? So, for example, a SaaS product can create a product and reach huge amount of customers for that product with relatively little sort of investment in that particular product. You're not necessarily investing in, if I was to have a car yard, for instance, I would need space, I would need land, I would need a building, I would need all of those sort of things, right? So we need to think about leverage with AI. Okay. Now, we'll go into our agent frameworks, right? So AutoGen, obviously, that's why we're here today, but also LangChain is another option, which is also fantastic. I actually have come more from developing from LangChain. AutoGen has only been around for about 6 months, so I've kind of transitioned some of my my development from LangChain to AutoGen because it does have some unique benefits. But I wouldn't, at the same time, say that one is specifically better than the other across the board, right? So AutoGen, multi-agent interaction, right? Allows the creation of applications with multi-agents, right? So we're talking about sequential chats, group chats, nested group chats, sequential message group chats, which we'll go through all of those a little bit. Modular design, right? So when we go into some code examples, you'll be able to see this, but it is quite easy to be able to construct agents in a very modular fashion, right? This is great for development because we can sort of have clearly defined tools and we can insert those tools here and there where it's appropriate and apply those tools to some agents and maybe not to some other agents, right? AutoGen Studio. So this is actually quite a recent one as well. So this is a UI for creating these agents, and it's quite easy. It's shockingly easy. It is quite new, so there is a little bit of bugginess, but I'm shocked at the rates of improvement on this. It's almost like on a weekly basis we're getting improvements for this product. So. And then human involvement. So it's quite easy to put human feedback into our conversation flow. LangChain, single agents. So we can, it's more of a two-way conversation, right? With the exception of LangGraph, which is sort of a recent development, that allows a multi-agent configuration, but it's not, in the first instance, a multi-agent framework. Now, the good thing about LangChain is there is a lot of community development behind it. So you get a lot of tools, you get a lot of stuff, right? So data connectors, connecting things like your Google Workspace, pretty much most of the things you use on a day-to-day basis applications, if they've got an API, someone's probably developed some sort of tool to service that. Now AutoGen doesn't have this, but it has something that I believe is a little bit better and easier because it allows us to create functions that can easily be pulled into our AutoGen model, which is fantastic, and we'll go over later again. Okay, so other agent frameworks. So I won't really go into these at all, but if you're interested, maybe some other ones you can play around with and have a look at. This was quite an interesting one about 6 months ago. It's sort of like a organization, and you give it a task, and it provides you with a playback of these conversations between different agents. And I think that's a really creative approach because one of the issues with sort of trying to communicate what we're doing here to people who aren't in this space is trying to get them to understand, okay, what does that mean? What does that code actually mean? And chat dev is a fantastic way to be able to visualize that. We see Crew AI, which I haven't actually used because I haven't got access yet, so they've restricted the access quite a bit. But that's another one that's quite recent, and a lot of people are having good success with that. AutoGPT was sort of the original agent that could go and search the web and do various different tasks. When I say do various different tasks, it's kind of like, in theory, do various different tasks, but often it wasn't that great. It was just go around in circles and not really do anything but talk a lot. But that's just, at that time, it was really cool. It's like, ooh, yeah, it's going and searching the web for me, it's creating documents. But then you go into the document and it's like not at all what you asked for, it's just completely different. So. All right, so we're going to go into some conversation patterns, and this can be sort of applied to a lot of these Asian frameworks, but I just want to sort of touch on them because it's important, and the way that these are often explained on these websites it's just not good, I don't think. It's just, someone's done the documentation and it's not clear to people who aren't really in that space and haven't worked with that framework quite a bit. So I thought it was important to really touch on this and go through what all of these actually are. So, starting with our most obvious one, our two-way chat. Now, this can be different depending on the framework, but I'm going to kind of sort of go first to the AutoGen example. So, in AutoGen, we send our request to a user proxy, right? So what is a user proxy? Well, a user proxy is an AI that replicates us. So the reason why we have this, and why this is kind of a good idea, is how many people have just gone and gone through ChatGPT and asked questions that they had to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Has everyone pretty much had that experience, right? So at some stage someone came up with the idea, okay, well, instead of me having to go back and forth, why don't I just get another AI to go back and forth with it on my behalf, right? And it seems reasonable, right? That makes sense. With less intelligent models, I have to admit, it definitely didn't get back to them in the way that I would. It would just sort of circulate this nonsensical conversation. But nowadays it's quite good. It's quite good, and we can specifically define what exactly are we looking for and what do we want to get out of AI, and we can tell this user proxy, and this user proxy will look at the messages coming back and assess whether that has actually been done. So if we go back to our first example, right, and you send an email, right, so it'll read that, it'll register that, look, our user has sent to me, the user proxy, which then goes and sends it to the AI, a request to send this email out, right? Has it done that? No, it hasn't, right? And AI can read that and determine that that is not the answer to that request. It's not the correct answer, right? Now, obviously, in that situation, it doesn't have the tool to do it. But we can establish there that it does have the fundamental ability to be able to look at the initial task and assess whether that has actually been followed through on. Right? Okay. Group chat, right? So in a group chat, there we go. Group chat. So a group chat, our human selves, go and send to our user proxy, right? The message, that's then distributed through our, that's a sequential chat. We'll go to the sequential chat because that's the next one. Group chat's next. So sequential chat is very similar to our initial two-way chat, right? So we're going two-way, so we're asking the user proxy the question. They're not doing anything to that question, but forwarding it to our assistant, right? And then they have this back and forth conversation here until the task is complete, right? In which case, there's a message that goes back, it's complete. Yes, question?
What happens if the user proxy identifies that the assistant cannot provide an answer?
Right.
Like, at what point does the cycle stop?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways. We put in a terminate message, right? So if it becomes established between these two actors that this is not possible, we don't have the ability to do this, and we can go through the functions and we can see these are the functions we have. we don't have the ability to do that, right? In which case, the chat will be terminated. So if either the user, and you can configure this differently, but if either of these actors prints a terminate message, the chat's terminated, right? So that would be that why. The other option is you can set a limit of how many chat cycles can we go through, which is good because you wouldn't want I remember when I used to play around with the AutoGPT, you'd set the thing to like 100 and then you just read back the transcript and it's just them talking absolute nonsense for 98 messages and you're like, why did I just spend all of these GPT credits? But back then they were a lot more expensive than they are now because they've got much cheaper. Right, sequential chat. So, in the sequential chat, we essentially go back and forth. Okay, so suppose we've asked, I want a blog post on this particular subject, right? Now this assistant might be a researcher, right? So their job is to go and get up-to-date information on that particular subject, right? Say I want the latest news on Apple, right? What's come out recently? There's been a lot that's come out, but in which case, this agent would go search, retrieve that information, here's the information, here's all the recent updates for Apple. And maybe this one's job is to then go and write a blog post about that, okay? So in this situation, we would go, user proxy, can you give me the up-to-date information on Apple? Sure, here it is, right? User proxy goes to our next chat, can you write a blog post about this information that's been provided? Sure, here it is. And then this is fed back up to our user as a completed blog post, right? Our group chat, similar kind of similar but different. This is where our user sends in a request and potentially we go to a planner, a researcher, a writer, right? So if we're sticking with that blog post example, we might say, user proxy, here's the task, draft up a plan on how best to achieve this task, right? And then that might go to the researcher. Okay, let me go and find the elements of this, right? So the planner might say, okay, the plan is this. We need to go and get the most up-to-date information on Apple, and then return that to the writer, right? So plan, get the most up-to-date information, step 1, step 2, write the blog article, right? So research looks at a plan, okay, out of these two options, what is my job here? Based on my system prompts, my job is to go and get the information, right? Cool, I'll go and get that. So the researcher goes and gets the information and then passes that to the writer, right? So in this situation, we're not going back and forth from user proxy to the, we're going straight from agent to agent, right? So gives the writer the information and then they go and write the blog post, which is then returned to the user proxy and the human, right? Does anyone have any questions on that? That's probably the most complicated thing, and as I'll probably explain, I'll explain it now actually. I actually don't like group chat. I'm not the biggest fan of it, and the reason is because if you have clearly defined tasks and one of these actors fails to deliver on that specific task, it can kind of knock out the entire flow, right? And there's a way we can kind of get around it with AutoGen, but I just don't think it's necessary, and we can achieve that task better with a sequential chat, right? Unless we have very sort of a wide variety of things that we're going to be asking these bots, and we need the workflow to be pretty flexible, we probably don't need to go group chat. We can just go, okay, I have a workflow that's defined for writing a blog, right? And then we can know that it goes through these clearly defined steps. And then we go human in the loop, right? So in this example, we just have a group chat, but on every iteration, right? So keeping in mind, these possibly, depending on the task, can actually go through this loop several times, right? So it's not just one specific loop, it could be many. right? So in this instance, every time a message goes from one of these actors, the human is, our user proxy requests feedback from the human, right? And the human provides that feedback. And that can be a very good instrument to be able to control our agents and make sure they're just not going off into no man's land with their ideas, right? So we can give specific feedback. So our agents will tell us, okay, this is what I've come up with, or this is, say I asked for the latest news on Apple, and our researcher comes back with, oh, the market for apples, of all of these different varieties, these juicy apples, are really good, right? It's like, that's not really the apple I was talking about. So we might give the feedback, actually I mean Apple Inc., like the technology company. It's not really likely to do that, but.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Do you give them prompts? Are they given prompts in the whole process to go on and say, you are such and such, and your task is this?
Absolutely, and I'll go onto that. We're almost at the end of these slides, and I do want to go into those examples. So let's just quickly go through these. And this is just a nested chat, okay? So a nested chat is a user proxy asks our assistant, okay, I want you to accomplish this task. Maybe I want you to, let's go with the blog post example. Write the blog post. And instead of the assistant going back, or there being a sequential chat, the assistant then confers with our researcher on its own, right? Without the involvement of other agents. And this can actually be a useful vehicle. Specifically, I use this for calling other, so I can actually use this as a nested workflow. I can actually, instead of just having one agent, I can actually have a full group chat as a nested chat, right? So say we had what I just spoke about before, we had specific workflows that could be, one could be to write blog posts, one could be to get a YouTube transcript and get all the information, the right stuff, or one could be to send emails and add things to my calendar, right? Maybe I actually want this assistant to be able to act as the user proxy, so our assistant kind of becomes the user proxy in this situation, and it has a nested chat, right? And that's kind of isolated from the rest of our actors, and it's a good way to control certain situations. I certainly wouldn't say this is something to start on. It's kind of it's useful for specific things, right? And what you mentioned before with the system messages and the prompting, I think if you have good prompting for almost all situations, you won't need to do nested chats, right? And then of course we have a sequential chat with a nested chat, right? So we have a sequential chat where we have multiple chats that go one after the other, and maybe one of this has a nested chat here, right?
Do you find a bit of a Chinese whispers effect happening?
What do you mean by that?
Like, does an error get amplified as it passes down the nesting?
Yes and no, it depends how we prompt it, right? Now, and this is where AI gets really, really tricky, because I think AI is very smart. We just have to act as a director, and we have to be responsible for being very specific. If I'm a manager in a company, right, and I go and give my subordinates just random, unclear instructions, they're probably not going to perform that well, right? So we need to be very specific with our system message and our prompting to get the best outcomes. But that can happen. But I will say, AutoGen has sort of a mechanism through which to error correct when that kind of happens. But yeah, good prompting. And also, as we get our GPTs get better and better, we don't see those issues as much, right? So this goes back to what I was saying with the group chat. People are like, if one agent is good, surely many agents is many good, right? We have agent teams and agent swarms, and this is the big thing that everyone's talking about. Whoever came up with agent swarms is not really like people saying, oh, it's going to take over the world. It's not the best sort of term. I don't know about the agent swarms, but I wanted to comment on this because I actually don't think that is correct. It's not necessarily the case that having a full team or full organization of agents is better than just one agent, right? And I'll go through some configuration on how we can achieve that, okay? But, okay, so here's the agent team example, right? So this is what people this is the idea people have, and this is kind of where I want you to sort of think the future. When you think of the future in this technology, this is what we'd be sort of the idea I have in my head, right? So I'm an individual, and I kind of control a bunch of agent teams, or an agent team myself that acts as kind of my personal assistants, right? They work for me, right? So here we've got like our data analyst, our consultant, and someone who's marketing, who's super mad about sales has promised to somebody. So yeah, your personal organization, right? And instead of get back to me by the end of the week, get back to me by 9 seconds, right? So that is a benefit. We can get tasks done quickly and not have to pay a bunch of people to do it, right? Okay, so let's crack into some examples because we are short on time and I want to leave a few minutes for the questions. And I'll stay behind for a bit to answer any of your questions that you might have. This seems quite complicated, but it's really not. Let me zoom in a little bit because that's kind of hard to see. There we go. All right. So this is what our code looks like, okay? So we'll actually go into a better example here, just that's a bit more simplified, right? Okay, so what we do is we have our config list, right, which basically just defines what our API key is, right? So here we've got our config list, we're using GPT 3.5 Turbo and our API key there, right? Now, with this config list, we can use this for our agents, right? So we're constructing an assistant agent here. This is a very simple assistant agent. We haven't even put in a prompt there, right? Now, what we've also done here is we've got our user proxy agent. So that's our user proxy agent that we were talking about before, right? So this acts on our behalf, right? Now here I put always in, right? So when I spoke about that human in the loop, this is what we're talking about, always, right? So every iteration of this chat, I want to have input, right? So we just run this. Oh, our config list is gone. Because I've organized these into folders. I've messed up the path here, right? So we just adjust that to reflect the actual location of that config list. And we should be fine now. All right, plot a chart of meta, total stock, price change. And we have our code. Here is that, please save. Okay, where is our? Okay, so see coding here. So we have that code that's being generated there, right? And if we install this, we should be able to run this code. Fix. Copilot's amazing. Most of the time. Let's- Oh, actually, so it's asking for human feedback there, so I'm just going to skip that. So if I just put in after no input. Okay, so it's actually made that, so it's actually going to execute. So see that? I did not install that library just then. So it's just done that on my behalf and fixed that error. So I'm actually glad I fixed that. And then there we go. So it's just created that document for us, and we have the stock price there. Okay. So what we may have noticed there is that we had some libraries there, some modules that we didn't have installed, and it's just gone ahead and done that. And this goes back to what I mentioned to you before with these error correcting that we can achieve there. Okay. Now our group chat. Let's have a look. So find papers on LLM applications and create a markdown table of different domains. I'm not going to do that because it's going to ask me to install a bunch of different modules. Let's go back to our more advanced configuration. So we're running out of time, and I want to show you some tools. Okay, so what I've done is I've actually enabled some tools here, right? So this is where I'm going to put our tools, set for our tool belt, and give it to our agents, okay? So we'll just run down each line and I'll explain exactly what's going on here, right? So here I'm asking it to create a coding folder, right, to put all of that code work into, right? We're using a local command line executor, right? So that's just our computer, it's executing on our behalf. Now, we can do a local LLM configuration, right? So this one, I don't think we have time today, but if we launch LM Studio, we can actually just use a local model, right? And these models are getting great. So in the sense that you used to have a great big machine that you'd have to, with heaps of GPU memory and the latest graphics card, but we can see models like Microsoft's Phi 3. I've never known exactly how to pronounce that, but that can actually run on something like this, which is a MacBook M1. And I brought this specifically because I wanted to show you how to run it on something as not great as this. But Grok, I don't know if anyone's ever used this, but it's a different provider where you can use Llama 3 and get some, use that as your API. But I'm just going to stick with OpenAI GPT-4o, which is the recent model that just was released this week. So I've defined two agents here, right? Conversible agent, which we call a system, right? I've just given it a system message. I'm just going to delete that because that was just some stuff I was experimenting with. But you're a helpful assistant that uses tools to assist users with various tasks. To complete these tasks, you can use tools that are available to you, right? And this goes back to that terminate message that you were asking about before, right? Reply terminate when the job is done, right? Okay, so I just put our configuration there as LLM configuration, which is the variable I put our OpenAI key into. And then we have our user proxy agent here, right? So when the user proxy agent sees this message, that's when it terminates, right? Human input never, and we've defined our code executor here, right? So that's our local code executor. You can actually just put this all in the same configuration, but that's okay. So this is where it gets really important. The entire point of this whole agent experiment is that we wanted to have tools, right? How do we do the tools? And this is what I really want to show you. Okay. So this is our two-way chat. We have an assistant and we have our user proxy, right? Now, what I've done is I've got a bunch of files here, and I've got web tools, file tools, miscellaneous tools, media tools. I've got a Google Workspace tools, okay? And I've just put this in my tool belt folder here, right? So let's go through some general tools. So you'll notice this is nothing special. It's just a Python function, okay? Now, when I spoke about LangChain, it's great that it has all of these inbuilt functions that people have made, but I actually like the idea of just being able to put my own in and create my own, and it just work. And it's, whilst you get a lot of tools inbuilt with LangChain, with this sort of system, it makes it very easy just to go on the documentation of whatever API you're looking to interact with, and just copy and paste that whatever their specific functions. They'll obviously often have some examples. This is how you send an email with Gmail. This is how you do this and that, right? So I've created a function here to create files, create folders in my local directory, read and write files. So that's just my class file tools. If we go media tools, I've just put in something, generate and save images. That's with our, and this kind of goes back to our, this is sort of somewhat of a nested chat. Because what we're doing here is we've defined a tool that then goes and retrieves the, retrieves a image by the OpenAI API for image generation, right? So we're using DALL-E 3 to go and create an image. And I've also, another useful one, if you have web-based, has anyone used any scraping tools like Playwright, Selenium, that sort of stuff? Yeah, it can be actually quite a useful configuration if you really want to automate your web-based tasks. You can define a tool that is just a Selenium script that I can go and, if I want to get the latest specials on Amazon, or something simple like create some documentation and upload it to a bookkeeping website. Or maybe you want to get your business, you get a bunch of invoices that you need to pay, you need to upload that into your bookkeeping interface, whatever it is, Xero, whatever, logs in on your behalf, you put your credentials in an ENV file or whatever, or just in the script, which I wouldn't recommend, and it can log you in and actually do those tasks in its own window. But going back to our, so what's that time, 55, all right, 55 minutes. And another thing I did want to go over as well is I've got these prompt functions, right? And the reason I configured it this way, and I don't actually know that this is a very common way, but I have actually got good results with it. I mentioned before that we get great results when we prompt correctly, right? So, but we can't prompt for every little situation, right? It's going to blow out the context window, right? So for different tasks, maybe we want to be able to just have to pull in prompts for that specific task and just have it there, right? I think a lot of people in AI just have a big document somewhere with all of the prompts that they use, right? So what I've done is I've just got a get function creation instructions, right? And I've just, when I ask our AI to create a function, it will just return, it'll call this function here, which returns the instructions that it should use to create a function, right? If I ask it to. And then a React prompt, which we might go into today, but that's a way of getting an agent to really think about what it's doing and kind of put through a plan. I don't think it's that necessary in in this day and age because our AI has gotten smarter. But anyway, going back to our agents, what we need to do is we need to register for our assistant that these functions exist, right? So it's in miscellaneous tools, and it's called get weather, right? So getting weather for a specific city. So we can see tool belt, general tools, web tools, and miscellaneous tools there, right? So for all of these tools, I just created a description and what it does. And I also need to do that for our user proxy. Yeah, they're all one line, okay? So the user proxy, we don't need to put in a description. We just need to give it the name, right? So, a simple example, please move the files from my desktop. Suppose I just have a desktop here. I'm just going to, I have a bunch of random files. Okay. Please move files from desktop to a new folder created called triage, right? And you can just really go ham on this, right? So I've gotten to create full directories of, I want a projects folder with all of these different. Okay, well that has not worked. That is something I'll have to look into. Migrant source, let's see if it's created that folder. It's created that folder. It has not moved the files. That's okay, we'll move to another example. Please. And I understand that we are at time, so if you guys, I'm going to stick around and keep going through examples. If you want to leave, that's totally fine. Everyone's, yeah. I just have run out of time here today. We have quite a few examples. So it's gone and searched the internet. It's called our SERP API function, right? It's actually one of the bad things about the new OpenAI model. It's so quick. Usually you'd be able to see like it going as it's doing it, but it's just like you're like, oh, I can't keep it. That's okay. It's all strange. That was our previous one. We can see. Okay. Suggested tool, perform SERP API function, right? That's gone and perform that search. We've got the results. And I also have another function here. It's a web scraping tool. So if I want to get really specific information, I can give it a website or search. Let me get all of those links and really go into the website, the web pages itself, iterate through the body sections of the web page, get all of that information, and then use that for your completion, right? So, yes. Now, I have a million more of these, but I'm going to quickly show you how to launch AutoGen Studio UI so that we can get an idea of what that actually is. All right, so AutoGen Studio UI, this is basically the UI for AutoGen, right? So if you're going to start, I would just start with this. It's a fantastic tool. Everything's very clear. I'm going to go through this quite quickly, but hopefully it should be enough to get you started, right? So we have different sections here. We have our skills, right? Which is tools. It's functions, it's tools, it's all the same thing, right? So for instance, if we look at our fetch profile function, what's happened here is we've just dropped a function in, right? So you can go on GitHub and find functions for all the different random different things. Grab it, drop it in here, done, right? You don't need to install any of these modules, don't need to do any of that, just drop it in, right? And we say that our web scraper, yeah, we've got a scraper here, and we say to put it in there, okay? So, new search, and we can configure these things to do various different actions. So for instance, with a SERP API search, there's configuration for news, you can search for shopping, you can search for just general Google News, and any of the sort of stuff you see on Google, where you have different tabs, images, that sort of stuff, you can define that kind of thing. And I think we have to shortly head over to the thing first. Our models, we put our models here, we just configure our models. Our agents, we can build our agents here, new agent, put in our system message, all of that sort of stuff. And then our workflow is where we define how our agent, our user proxy, and what agents we want to use, right? So the modular design means we can kind of just pull in various different agents for specific workflows.
So you have to define the user proxy as one agent, and the other agents are separate agents.
So it depends if you're using two-way chat or group chat, right?
Yeah.
And we can also just, if we have this workflow, we can download this, and we can use this in a script, and we'll just right here. And that would be so it just downloads a JSON configuration, and we can run it in a script there, right? So we can just run it in a Python file, and whether you put it into like a Streamlit application, something like that, right? So it's an easy way to kind of get all of that information, all of the skills, all of the model, all of that details, and just have it in this workflow here, right? So that contains everything it needs to run that chat. Anyway, thank you very much for this. I really appreciate it. I haven't spoken for a couple of years, so my timing's off. I really wanted to show all of you much more, but
You're obviously just making up for it.
sorry.
You're obviously just making up for it.
Yeah, exactly.
And all these extra words you had to get out.
But yeah, please see me after if you have any questions. I really appreciate you guys staying a bit longer as well. So, yeah, thank you. No worries. That's not good.
Oh,
Should be.
Sure. What do you have to drink? So, whole agent story.
Yeah.
Agents. I've not seen how you work with agents in the way that you would schedule them. So they sort of work in the background or ask the question of using this for you. Everything is, I suppose, you've got a prompt the agent, you've got a prompt the agent, you've got a prompt the agent. People are saying, wouldn't it be great if I could actually have an agent that just didn't need prompting, it was out there doing stuff. When I wake up in the morning, it's already going to scan my mailbox and says, here's the 20 things in your mailbox you didn't do yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, what you could do is you could just set up you could just put that within a script. And I have agents running just on a Raspberry Pi to go and do things, right? So a good example would be, I have a home assistant sort of bot that it will just go and do stuff through my home assistant, and I can just control it with my voice. And it always should be on, right? So the script is always running, because when I call it, I have a wait word. It's basically a rapid correct of Alexa, right? But it actually works well, and I can just customize it however I want, and I can put it in. So that would be an example of something that's running all the time. What if you were, an example might be every 15 minutes it calls your Gmail API to check whether there's any messages that conform to this, like, that have invoice in it, right?
Yeah.
In which case it goes, grabs that, puts it in your key name, right? That would be an example